Not to brag, but May was my best reading month of the year so far by a grand total of 38 pages. My previous best reading month of the year up until this point was January, and I think that there's a couple of things that contributed to how I managed to read a little bit more than I have been in May. The first one is that I did a bunch of immersion reading, which is where you listen to the audiobook at the same time as reading the book physically. This is an amazing focus tip for me because I have such a distracted, noisy brain that I often find myself reading 10 pages and picking up my phone without even realizing that I've done it, or I'm like reading but I'm also thinking of my to-do list, so I'm not taking anything in and I have to backtrack, and it just contributes to me reading extremely slowly. So by listening to an audiobook at the same time, it really helps to keep me on track and focused and looking at my actual book instead of literally looking at anything. But I also read a few epic fantasies this month, which, as you guys know, they do tend to be a little bit on the longer side, which helped to bump my page count up even though I only read 8 books total. And with the stack of books that I read in May, actually, you'll see that I kind of alternated between something thick and something epic and like a contemporary romance to help me cleanse my palette. But getting into the statistics for May, you will see here that I haven't recorded any of the books that I read as audiobooks, even though I immersion read, I think, 5 of the books that I read this month. I listened to the audiobook in some capacity, whether that was for the entire thing while I was reading along or just when I was feeling especially distracted. But I've chosen to record these as the formats, like the physical formats that I read, as opposed to audiobook. But in May, I read 3,842 pages across 8 books, which broke down to an average of 124 pages per day. For the star ratings, I had 3 3-star reads and 5 4 stars, which broke down to an average of 3.6 stars per book. For the demographics, I finally read something other than adult books this month. I read 1 young adult, 1 new adult, and 6 adult. For the formats, I read 4 standardly formatted novels and 4 ebooks. For the genres, a very easy split of all my favorites. I read 4 fantasy books, 2 fantasy romance, and 2 romance books. For the places that I sourced these books from, 4 of them were subscription box books, 3 of them were from Kindle Unlimited, and 1 was a book that I bought new. And then finally, the length of time that these have been on my TBR. 3 of them were from my TBR that existed prior to the start of 2026. 3 of them are digital library items, which will be those KU books, and 2 are books that I have hauled in 2026. So starting off with the beginning of the month, the first thing that I tackled was the Fairy Loot Epic Fantasy subscription. If you missed it, I did post a vlog reviewing the first year of Fairy Loot's Epic Fantasy subscription with some very surprising results. I'll link that for you guys if you want to go and catch up. But one of my favorite books of the month, and definitely one of the most surprising, is The Bone Raiders by Jackson Ford. The more that I sit with this book, the more that I enjoy it, and I've actually recently ordered the sequel from Orbit's 50% sale, and I'm so excited to get to it. So this one is about a clan of raiders that live in this vast landscape called the Tapestry. There is a Khan who is trying to establish a city within this land. So he has forcibly taken all of the villages, all of the settlements, and all of the clans in the surrounding areas and forcing them to join his city, which actually does not have any infrastructure in place to support all of these people. And so it is essentially little more than a slum for the general members of the population. Our clan that we're following are called the Rakada, and they want nothing to do with this city, but they are really struggling for resources. They don't even have anybody to raid at this point, and they now have apex predators to contend with because the giant fire-breathing lizards that normally stay out of everybody's way up in the mountains are now coming down to the Tapestry to hunt because the Khan is disrupting their hunting grounds, trying to find food to feed his city. And so our main characters, desperate not to fall to this Khan, decide to try and harness the power of these fire-breathing lizards and learn learn how to ride them, so that the next time they face one of the Khan's like brigades of soldiers, their victory is assured. So to achieve this, they head into the city where they know there is somebody with an affinity to animals who can help them to train the lizards to do their bidding. Something that I was confronted with immediately in this book is humor, which usually does not work for me in fantasy. I have been thinking about making a recommendation video of books, like fantasy books that are humorous, that have actually worked for me, because there are a small amount that I actually really enjoy, this being one of them. The humor in this book specifically is typically conveyed throughout the dialogue, which is something that I can sometimes work with, and I feel like Jackson Ford did a wonderful job in here of balancing humorous dialogue with more serious, heartfelt topics. And I do feel like this is what really worked for me, because I often find when you have that humorous tone, when you bring a little bit of a levity to the text, the more serious moments do tend to hit a little bit harder, which is how I felt this book landed for me. One of the strongest elements of this book for me were the found family, and one of the beautiful things about what Jackson Ford does in this book is that he presents us with protagonists that in a typical fantasy novel would be our adversaries. We are following a raiding clan, and the first chapter of this book is one of our characters, like one of our raiders, invading another settlement, and they have a code of honor. They have rules, like they don't hurt children, they don't hurt people who don't fight back, but they are still displacing these people and stealing their resources in a time where resources are hard to come by, which is something that they know because they're finding less and less people that they are able to raid. And the Khan himself, who is establishing the city, who we are seeing as the bad guy, actually does not have terrible intentions. He is trying to protect the people of this land from people in surrounding areas that may want to invade. So it's really interesting that the protagonists of this novel are the raiders, each with a distinct and different backstory and also different personalities that kind of meld together into this perfect found family scenario. There is one character in here called Hoon, who is probably my favorite. She really embodied the character of the grandmother of the Croods to me. Yes, I am talking about the animated movie, who in that movie, she does provide a lot of comedic relief, and I feel like Hoon is the same in here. Like, she's kind of zany, crazy, she's unpredictable, but honestly has one of the most heart-wrenching backstories. So out of all of the books that I read for the Fairy Loot Epic Fantasy subscription, this is the one that I predicted that I would actually enjoy the least, and it turned out to be my favorite of the bunch. And I have also been promised that the sequel to this is a little bit darker, which I'm very excited about. I then took a little bit of a break from that vlog for a palette cleanser, and I read Nightshade by Autumn Woods, which is a dark academia contemporary romance. The reason why I picked this one up is because Fairy Loot were about to put their special editions on sale, which were absolutely stunning. And so with it being a contemporary romance, I don't have a great need for hardback contemporary romance, with a few like exceptions of my favorites or favorite authors. But this one is following a young woman who has been offered a full scholarship to a prestigious university that teaches the elite. The university is split into 4 houses. Each house specializes in a particular area. Like, the people who are going to be finance bros go in one particular house, people who are going to be successful athletes go to a different one, so on and so forth. And our main character is not privileged like the rest of the students here, but her parents did used to work on the grounds until their untimely death. So our main character is attending this university because it's now the only option that she has for her future, given how much time away from pursuing her studies she has taken in grieving her parents. But she also hopes that attending Sorosong University will give her the answers to her parents' death, and she thinks that she knows who is responsible. She thinks it is the man who owns the helicopters that are used to take the staff to and from the university, because their parents died in a helicopter crash, and she is hoping to take revenge on the man that she thinks is responsible. So something that is not on her university bingo card is growing closer to this man's son. So this is a hate to love, dark academia style romance, and you know what? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did make a whole vlog dedicated to this one, and it is spoiler free if you guys want to check it out. I do think that it is a flawed romance. I did pick up a ton of inconsistencies and also plot holes within it, but I do think that this one was extremely compulsively readable, and the further that I got into the book, the more I actually enjoyed it. I started off open but pretty lukewarm at the beginning, and by about 70% in, I was obsessed. I love a man written by a woman. I love a man who falls first, which with the tagline on the cover of this, you get a pretty good indication that that is the way that this is going to go. And I also love the element of a forbidden romance that you have created in this one by the fact that our main character is desperately trying to stay away from the love interest. One, because she doesn't trust him given the family that he's a part of, and two, because she aims to destroy his family and she doesn't want to feel guilty about it, which she will do if she continues to grow closer to him. Now, I ended up giving this one a 4.5. I didn't feel like I could give it 5 stars with the inconsistencies that I pointed out because, you know, it's not a perfect polished book. Given that it's traditionally published, I think that the editing should have been better in it. But I also felt like the last 10% or so of this was a little bit rushed because we were trying to set up the events for the sequel, so we had to have something that kind of destabilized what we had been working towards in book 1 to create conflict for a book 2 to exist. And I feel like it resulted in one of the characters in particular acting out of character. It all felt very for the sake of the plot, but not actually realistic within the bounds of what we learned about these characters so far. So I am very excited for the release of Daybreak, which I believe is in July, and I will continue because I ate this one up. It sucked me in. I will say though that it is one that kind of consumed me in the moment, but I don't think it's going to leave an incredibly lasting impression on me. I then returned back to the Fairy Loot vlog to finish it up, and I read The Book of Fallen Leaves by A.S. Tamaki. This one has been marketed as Game of Thrones with samurai, and I do feel like that is a very apt description of this one because we are following squabbling nobility who are trying to control the empire, while in the background we have a demonic presence that is creeping into the forefront. So this, like Game of Thrones, hinges on a rebellion that happened before the start of the novel. 3 of the older characters that we follow in here, or at least see pretty frequently, banded together to overthrow, I think he's called the Demon Emperor. One of these people became the Grand Chancellor, who is essentially the person who rules the empire and works out all of the politics. I think one of them became the Emperor, who are essentially supposed to look nice and give a impression of ruling, but it's actually the Chancellor that calls all of the shots. And the third one became a rebel because shortly after they overthrew the Demon Emperor, he tried to rebel against the Chancellor specifically, I think, and he was killed for it. So his daughter was taken to where the rest of the nobility are, and she was kept kind of as a hostage. Her lands were stripped from her, but she was still allowed to keep her title. She's essentially living under very close scrutiny, and now she wants to claim back her lands because they have allowed her to live, given the fact that they are not holding her accountable for the transgressions of her father, and yet she is not allowed any titles, she's not allowed any land, she's not allowed to actually have any of the things that she would have been owed had her father lived. Now, her brother was actually thought dead during the rebellion, but his uncle, who is the current captain of the guard, managed to squirrel him away to this noble family who would raise him. And he is currently trying to train to be a warrior. So right at the beginning of this book, he petitions a monk to train him. Throughout the course of these very early chapters of the book, he is also thrown into the path of the girl who was found with him on the night that the rest of his family were slaughtered. She is in a very different position to him, where she has been raised as essentially nobody. She's been raised as an outcast, and through a very unfortunate series of events, she also ends up traveling with the monk as penance for an accident that she was essentially responsible for. And then we have, I think, 3 other perspectives. One are the demons. That one's a very sporadic perspective throughout here, but it's what starts the book. We then also have the perspective of Sen and Kai's uncle, so the brother of the murdered traitor, who's currently the captain of the guard, and he is trying to keep peace as all of these noble houses are kind of rising up and trying to fight against against each other. It's actually the father, I think, of the current emperor who wants to start a civil war in this country because he can see that the chancellor is seizing control at every opportunity he can get. So he actually petitions the family, like this disgraced rebellion family, to take up arms and fight back against the chancellor. And the brother of the rebel, Kai and Sen's uncle, is trying very much to keep the peace, as he did many, many years ago when his brother was the one rebelling. And then the last perspective we have comes a little bit later in the novel. I think it's over halfway through. So I'll let you discover that one for yourself. As this is epic fantasy, it's really hard to give a concise synopsis for it, as you can probably guess. And also because it's epic fantasy, it is really hard for me to give a fair judgment of it based on this one book, which you may think is crazy because, you know, this book, she's pretty thick. But in my experience with epic fantasy, the majority of first books in series are set up, and the series actually only really takes off in the second book. And this is true, in my opinion, of Game of Thrones. It's true of The Faithful and the Fallen, Red Rising, which is sci-fi but still has like an epic plotline. And I do personally find that epic fantasy series with a standout book one are the exception as opposed to the rule. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that I cannot currently read book two because it is not released yet. I do feel like this does a very good job of setting up the world, setting up the characters. I like the setting of this. This is obviously a Japanese inspired fantasy, and I really liked that influence on the novel. I love scheming nobility. I wish we'd had more balanced perspectives in terms of having more perspectives on the chancellor's side of things as opposed to mainly just following all the members of this one clan. My favorite character was Yora, who was the older character, the uncle of Kai and Sen, mainly because he was giving us the majority of the information on the history, the rebellion, overthrowing the demon emperor, because he was the only perspective that we had that had lived through it. The rest of the perspectives we follow were a lot younger. And I also really like the perspective of Kai because she was more dealing with the political machinations. She was handling the nobility, while Sen, and I think Rui is the name of the girl that he was found with when he was a child, they were together for the most part, so a lot of their perspectives kind of overlapped. And also they were dealing more with some of the magical elements, to be fair, and also more physical kind of warrior training, more action based parts of the story. But overall, while the end of this left me very intrigued to see what happens in book two, I feel like this book mainly serves as a foundation, as a springboard for the rest of the series. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. There was a lot about it that I really enjoyed. I see a lot of potential here, but I don't feel like this book has realized that potential. So we're going to have to see when book two is released whether I'm kind of still committed enough to dive into that one, because I feel like this one had so much information in it that I would definitely like to reread it. I then dove into another epic fantasy because it was catch-up book club time, and I read The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So this one is the second book in the Bloodsworn saga, which is John Gwynne's Norse mythology inspired epic fantasy series. We start this series following three characters in various points of the world as they all converge on this epic plotline that features gods. All of the books in this series have gods in the title, and they are a key part of this story. Now, this is another one that is very difficult to give a synopsis of because we don't really know how all of the characters are related until we get to the end of book one. It's another example of a series where book one is just really setting you up, getting acquainted with the world, the magic, how things currently are, getting you acquainted with the characters before we get to the actual plot. So, you know, I typically enjoy series like this that have a slow start. It is just with the Book of Fallen Leaves, I just don't have anything else to go on right now to build upon that foundation of book one. But this one is set in a world that is already magical. There is already some semblance of magical in this world that continues to escalate throughout the course of the series. But we have like forest spirits, spirits, like guardians of the gods would in Game of Thrones. We have small remnants of the gods, like the gods' children or little creatures that were created by the gods way back when. We also have a lot of lore and history regarding the gods, because it is documented history in this world that there was a great war between all of the gods and they essentially all ended up killing each other. There is this mythical land that is essentially the graveyard of the gods, and the bones of the gods in this world are extremely valuable. The legacy of the gods is ever present. There is a city in this world that is built into the skeleton of a snake, and then you also have the tainted, who are people that possess the blood of the gods, and depending on which god they descend from depends on what powers they have from that. And these people are oppressed and they are thralled because this is still a world that operates on slavery. Now, alongside all of the magical stuff we have going on, we also have some political developments in this plot, similar to the Bone Raiders by Jackson Ford. Actually, all of these small areas like the Yaldoms of this world are gradually disappearing or joining together to become a whole. And we have royalty that have risen up in this world. There is a queen who is trying to convince a bunch of Yaldoms to join her because there is a very powerful Jarl that is like bordering them, and if they don't join together then they're all essentially going to be killed and defeated. And we have a few of these different factions around the world that are gearing up to be vying for power in the area where this book is mainly set. And alongside all of that, we have children going missing. And one thing that ties our perspectives together very early on is that even though they're all scattered around the world, even though all of their reasons and motivations and catalysts vary, all of them are looking for a missing child. So I did really enjoy book one, although I did feel like it was a slow burn. I felt like it took a long time to kind of figure out why all of the characters were relevant. But the more we got into the book and the more we got towards that point, the more I was enjoying it. And I really enjoyed book two because I felt like it really endeared me to some of the character perspectives that I wasn't feeling as connected to in book one. So of the three perspectives that we start this series with, Orca was the only one that I was truly invested in up until book two. Our other two perspectives of Elvar and Varg took a lot longer to grow on me, but I felt like we spent a lot more time with them in this book. We got to know them on a little bit of a deeper level that made me more invested in their stories. We do also once again accelerate the magic of the world in ways that I really loved. We also got to explore some of the, I've described them as like the homes of the gods, like in the vlog where I talked about this one, because it's not necessarily where the gods have ever lived. It's more kind of like their ancient lairs. We got to explore a few of those throughout the course of this book, which I also found really interesting. And as we go forth into the series, into the final book, I just feel like that element of the gods is going to get more and more present, come more to the forefront of the book, which, given how much I enjoyed those interactions in this book, I am very much looking forward to. Something that I really enjoy about this series is how it focuses on the hubris of humanity and how humans think that they are more deserving and superior to any other species on Earth. I felt like we had a very gradual build in the confidence and the arrogance of some of the human characters as everyone is kind of vying for power that is going to help them get ahead of each other. And I feel like it's going to backfire on them spectacularly as the political plotline and the potential brewing war we have going on comes to a head alongside the increase in the magical presence and the presence of the gods that we're getting in this world. And the events, especially at the end of this book, everything that we were building up to throughout this one, I feel like has set a precedent that I am very excited to see come to a conclusion in book three, because if they do what I think they're going to do, it's going to be real juicy because it is going to massively destabilize this world. It's going to cause a catastrophe and I kind of want to see it happen. I then treated myself to a little mood read and I read The Score by Elle Kennedy, which I've had out on KU since I read the first two books last year. They've since taken them off, which honestly is rude because now I don't know when I'm going to get around to book four in that series. But The Score 4 is the third book in the Off-Campus series. I have watched the Off-Campus show this month as well. I don't think that it's perfect by any means, but I do think that it's compulsively watchable and very addictive, and also very reminiscent of a ton of pop culture moments from the early 2000s, specifically like the early 2000s to the 2010s, I want to say, which, you know, is my era, so I really enjoyed that. And as a fan of the book The Deal, I really enjoyed seeing that come to life. So I decided that after I'd binged through that series that I wanted to pick up the series where I was at, which conveniently was Dean and Ali's book, which we have now had confirmation that the show is going to skip over book 2 for now, go into book 3, and then I'm assuming come back in season 3 to do The Mistake, which is John Logan's book. But our female main character in this one is Ali. She is the roommate and best friend of the protagonist of book 1, which is Hannah, and she is a serial monogamist, and she has just broken up with her on again off again boyfriend for the final time. She has convinced herself that she is emotionally capable of handling a situationship, which she embarks upon with one of the hockey players, of course, who is Dean De Laurentiis, who is a notorious fuckboy. So imagine both of their surprise when they went into this with the intention of keeping it very casual, and they both start to catch feelings. So I gave this one a 3.5 star rating. I very much enjoyed it. I really like the chemistry between Ali and Dean. It didn't quite hit the heights of The Deal for me. I think I just read that at a perfect time where I ate it up, so I'm a Garrett Graham stan forever, but I did really enjoy the relationship between Ali and Dean. Something that I really enjoy about Elle Kennedy's books as well is that while for me they're kind of a no thoughts, head empty, like easy to read kind of palate cleanser, they do still deal with serious topics. And when I first went into Elle Kennedy's books, when I read The Deal last year, because they'd been published so long ago, like 10 years ago, I really expected these books to be full of problematic elements, but I feel like Elle Kennedy does a good job of dealing with serious topics in a more sensitive way than I expect for the genre at the time that she was publishing these, like way back at the start of her career. And as somebody who likes a little bit extra in my romance, I do like that she has these additional plot lines running alongside the romance to kind of keep me interested. So I am still interested in continuing on. This is not like a serious commitment for me, this series. Hopefully at some point they'll put the Off-Campus series back on KU, because at this point I don't really want to invest in the elusive Works paperback box set that nobody can get their hands on. I don't need physical copies of this series past book 1, so hopefully at some point I'll be able to get my hands on The Goal, I think, is book 4, although that one does not have a trope that I especially love. I don't mind reading it on occasion, and given that it's part of a series I enjoy, I do plan to pick that one up at some point when I can get my hands on it. Next up, I finished my first of 2 series that I completed in May, which is quite the achievement, by reading Shadow and Storms by Helen Shura. I keep getting confused about which way around those words go in this title, but I'm pretty sure that that's the correct way. This one is the final book in the Legends of Thesmar series, which I was reading for my Patreon book club. It is a romancy series that is following this young woman who wants nothing more than to be one of the legendary warriors of Thesmar. However, because of a prophecy that says that the Daughter of Darkness is going to wield a blade and bring about the end of days, women are no longer allowed to bear arms or train to be warriors in this world. And so the main character petitions the royalty to find herself a loophole which allows her to begin training as a warrior of Thesmar, which throws her into the path of one of the surliest and most isolated warriors, Wilder Hawthorne. So I've had a little bit of a rough ride with this series. I actually really enjoyed book 1. Book 2 I really didn't like. Book 3 I thought was the strongest in the series, but by that point I had lost the level of investment that I needed to like really rate this series highly. And book 4, once again, I thought was very strong. I think that the end of this book, the conclusion, like the wrap up of the conflict, was executed amazingly. I just didn't really care at this point because this series unfortunately had kind of lost me in book 2. Once a book loses me, it is really hard for me to get back engaged in it and be able to commit to it again, which is really unfortunate. And I want to know, actually, do you guys have any kind of tips where if you start to kind of lose interest in a series to get yourself grounded back in it? Because series. I would actually generally recommend this series as a solid one within the romantasy genre. I would say if you're looking for a standout, something that is going to blow your mind, become your new favorite series of all time, this would not be the one that I suggest that you read. But if you're somebody who really likes the romantasy genre and kind of just wants to eat up everything within it, then I would say that this is a fairly decent one. It had a couple of moments that really surprised me within that end portion of this book, where I really liked the way that Helen Shaw tied up some elements of the plot and how she brought some things that had been present from the very beginning and made them relevant in those final moments in a way that I didn't expect. But what I kind of wanted from this series is a little bit more of that energy that we got right at the end of book 4, but throughout the whole thing. I like to have moments like that where I'm confronted kind of with the unexpected or a really clever play on the plot. At least I want to say twice per book to keep me mentally engaged. And I just felt like there were portions of this series that felt like they were going through the motions, especially book 2. Book 2 felt like it was trying to get us emotionally invested for the plot to unfold at the end of book 2 going into book 3 and 4. But I think that the way that Helen Shaw tried to execute that was just to make them have sex a lot, and I didn't care. Still throughout this book, there wasn't as many sex scenes. It really does calm down after book 2, but I did skip all of them because I did not care about the two main characters. The interesting thing is that I also read the standalone connected to this series, and once again the main characters, when I was reading their standalone book, I didn't care for them as much, but I did really enjoy what I saw of them at the later points of this series where they were mentioned. And my two favorite characters in here are Cal and Kip. They performed from start to finish in this series. They were shining lights, and I'm so glad that I met them. Now I am in a little bit of a pickle because I finished this series too late to cancel my Fairy Loot order of books 2 and 3 in the spin-off series following Thea's sister. I have book 1 down there. It was the one included in the romantasy subscription, which the reason why I read book 1 in this series to begin with is because I swapped it out for that one when I did the romantasy rundown, where I read the first year of Fairy Loot's romantasy subscription. And I just feel like Helen Shaw is going to have to do a lot in this spin-off series, which I have heard is better than the Legends of Thesma, but I feel like she's really going to have to do a lot for me to be invested enough in this trilogy to keep the hardback set. So we'll see how it goes. I am going to continue and try at least book 1, but if I feel similarly about book 1 as I have about the Legends of Thesma, then I'm probably going to DNF that series there. I then read a young adult romantasy that I surprisingly really enjoyed. This is a book that I've had for 4 years almost. It's from June 2022. It's a Fairy Loot book from June 2022, and I've heard little to nothing about it, but I really enjoyed this Vicious Grace by Emily Tida, which I think is the pronunciation that I looked up for this name. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I found 3 different conflicted opinions on that. But this one is very reminiscent of Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry, and also from Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout in setup only. If you loved those, don't necessarily expect to love this. I just felt like the plot was kind of reminiscent, because in this one we are following the last Fenestra, which I think is the name of the series. It's a duology, and the Fenestras are chosen by the gods to amplify the powers of the magically gifted in this world. Now, the reason why it reminded me of From Blood and Ash is because there is a holy ceremonial element to being the Fenestra, in that you have to choose one person with these magical abilities, you then marry them, and you work together to hone your skills to fight back a demon horde that comes every generation to decimate the land, which is what reminded me of Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. However, we have a little bit of a catch in this one, because our main character is really struggling to amplify the power of her husband, and this is her 3rd one because she keeps killing them. So there is this priest that has gained quite a following in this world that no longer has faith in the Fenestra, and he's saying that the only way that they're going to survive this demon horde hard as if she is killed. So when her own guard turn against her, she sneaks off out into the city and she finds this like fighting ring, and she picks up this outcast and asks him to protect her because she can no longer trust anyone, and she is desperately, she doesn't mean to kill people, like she's trying her hardest to perform her task as the Fenestra. She just can't figure out why she keeps accidentally killing everyone. Something that I really enjoyed about this one is that I felt like we had quite believable stakes. The demon horde, they always come at like around the same time. It's like a once per generation kind of thing. And once again, like with Shield of Sparrows, there is normally something that heralds their arrival. Like they get a warning sign first. So from the moment that that warning sign shows up in this book, we then have a countdown to the day that this demon horde are going to invade, which puts extra pressure on our main character, especially as she, of course, is falling for this outcast that she's picked up and hired to be her guard, which is, you know, not great given the circumstances because she's got something else that she needs to be focusing on. But also, she has to marry the person that she's going to meld her powers with to fight back against these demons. She cannot be distracted or be in love with somebody else or marry somebody who doesn't have powers. This also was very nostalgic to me. It was very much in the vein of old school young adult fantasy. The kind of stuff that got me into fantasy as a genre like 10 to honestly 15 years ago now at this point. It was in style and pacing and structure. I found that it was very similar to things like Throne of Glass, to the Lunar Chronicles, and all of these series that I read many, many years ago that hold a really special place in my heart. And I really enjoyed getting back into a story that had that kind of structure and that kind of vibe. This one is a very Italian inspired world as well, which I really enjoyed exploring. But I do think that I would have liked a little bit more from the world building. We have a lot of terminology introduced at the beginning of this, which you kind of get to grips with very quickly given the context of the words that you're seeing. But there's a lot in here that I wish I knew more about, like the origin of the demon horde. Where are they coming from? Why are they attacking? When was the first recorded demon horde? Where did people think that they come from? What is the law? I felt like all of that was to be accepted, which is fine when you're thinking like from the perspective of these characters. Maybe it is just a part of the world that they accept. But I felt like this wasn't fleshed out enough that it satisfied my questions. I also think that the setup for the sequel in this series was a little bit rushed. I do think that the sequel will potentially answer a lot of those questions that I have, but I feel like it was quite jarringly shoehorned into the end as opposed to being a gradual build. I don't feel like it was a natural progression of curiosity from the characters. It was more like a, oh no, we now have to face this problem and this is how we're going to do it, as opposed to the world kind of organically and the plot kind of organically developing. So I had a really good time with this. I gave it 4 stars. I don't think that the sequel was as well received as this one, which I am a little bit worried about because I hate a disappointing sequel, but I do hope to get this from like Libby or something and prioritize it in the future just to wrap this one up, because this one exceeded my expectations. And then the final book that I read in May was also my favorite book of the month, and that was Human Rights by Juno Dawson. I am so glad that I had the opportunity to finish this series this month because I was supposed to do it last year and I just never got around to it. And honestly, this series holds such a special place in my heart, I think mainly because of where it's set. So if you guys don't know, this is the final book in the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series, which is following a group of women who are now, I think they're like mid-30s, and when they were children they joined a coven together, as young witches do, and they've gone through a lot since then. So in the early 20s there was a war between the witches and the warlocks, which had a lot of casualties, left them all with a lot of trauma for various reasons. And now one of these women is the High Priestess of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and she has found a prophecy that states that the sullied child will rise and will summon a demon that will bring about the end of days, and she thinks that she has found this sullied child. So she calls her childhood friend Neve, who still lives in their hometown of Hebden Bridge, she's working as a vet, and asks her to rehabilitate this child to hopefully try and subvert this prophecy, because at the moment the child is very closed off and very volatile. And as the ball starts to get rolling on this sullied child prophecy, all of these women who were so close in childhood and have all kind of gone their separate ways but remained friends have to come back together to save the world from a complete satanic takeover. So one of the things that I really love about this is how northern it is. It's set in predominantly Hebden Bridge, but like Her Majesty's Royal Coven is based in Manchester. One of these characters does live in London, but she is once again still from the same town that they all are. And I feel like the northernness of this is not only in the language and the dialogue, which it 100% is. It's not only in the setting, which I'm not from Hebden Bridge. I live in East Yorkshire now. I grew up in Greater Manchester, so like around the area, but not like super specifically. But all of this is just very nostalgic and familiar to me. But it's not just the dialogue, it's not just the setting. I feel like the characters, like these women, just exude northernness. The vibes, the atmosphere, the heart of this book exudes northernness, and it is so comforting to me that I just love it. I also really love that this series tackles some really serious societal issues in a way where it does not shy away or pretend that it is not putting forward the messages that it is putting forward, but in a way that doesn't detract from the fact that this is also a fantasy book to be read for entertainment with a really compelling plot line, which honestly sometimes gets a little wild, a little crazy, a little out of pocket, but still very compelling read. I also love that this series follows slightly older characters. We do have like the sullied child, Theo, we follow them. We also follow one of the women's children, so we follow a couple of younger like teenage perspectives, but the core characters, the original 4 women that start this whole thing, are all in their 30s, and I feel like they are such a realistic representation of women in their 30s with the way that they handle the obstacles thrown in their way, because we know through each of their individual backstories they all have bucket loads of trauma. They've been through an entire war. Some of them did not have the best childhood because of various reasons, and the people that they are today is very much shaped by everything that has happened to them. I was holding back tears reading the last 50 or 60 pages of this, not because there was complete devastation, which you can sometimes have at the end of a fantasy series, but actually because we had so many positive moments that weren't perfect. Like a lot of the characters in here, I would say all of them actually, suffer some sort of loss throughout this series, and some of them have suffered great loss before it as well. And the way that this kind of ended on a bittersweet note with these women pushing forward kind of in the face of all that loss really resonated with me, and this is a series that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. I do also hope to reread it at some point, and I gave it like, it's weird because the way that I talk about it, I feel like it should be 5 stars. I've given all of the books in this series 4 stars, but honestly, if I keep thinking about this book the way that I'm currently thinking about it, I think that this one could be a 5 because I really like the way that Juno Dawson brought all of this together. So here are most of the books that I read in the month of May, along with my 3 romantic lean-in ebooks. Let me know down in the comments if you guys have read any of these and what you thought. Also, of course, let me know what your favorite book of the month was so I can get some recommendations from the comments. But aside from that, if you guys would like to let me know you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, leave me a witch emoji for my favorite book of the month. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram and my Patreon if you want to follow me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.